What's good, everybody? It's your brother Mad Black, the most dangerous and the most toxic black man on the internet. The brother who told you to beware of these white bigots in pop culture, but you didn't listen, and now they've gotten you hating yourself to the point where you do harm to yourself. And I am black up in your face again with some more pro black commentary. So, a very sad story that I've seen a lot of black commentators doing videos on. And it's the story of a young girl, 19 years old. Her name was Ashley Paxton, black girl who loved doing cosplay and who liked to, be involved in a lot of conventions and geek and pop culture. And she wound up taking her own life because of all of the harassment and of all the racism and bigotry that she suffered at the hands of a lot of these bigots within the pop culture, geek culture, or nerd culture. So when I saw this story, it was very sad to see that. And once again, I've seen other people do commentaries on it, and I want to kind of give my perspective as someone who is involved in this type of culture, as someone who's an artist, who has worked in animation, who's worked in social games, who is someone who just enjoys doing artwork, whether it be my own characters or even doing fan art of popular characters that exist either in movies or comic books. And I've probably done it all. I've been to a lot of these conventions, whether you talk about the ones over on the West Coast or even like smaller ones that are geared more towards a black audience. I've been to them all, basically. And I create a lot of content that is sold at these types of conventions. So I think I have a pretty good handle on this community overall. And I can tell you, based on my own experience, yes, there is a lot of bigotry within these so-called nerd or geek circles in these spaces. There's a lot of bigotry going on there, a lot of white supremacy. And it's to the point where it's seeped in and it infects the entire basically the entire white side of these spaces, because for a lot of them, a lot of them feel like excuse me, a lot of them feel like, society sort of rejects them, or a lot of them feel like outsiders. So for them, when they get into comic books or video games or sci-fi or these movies or cosplay, it's an escape for them. So they feel like, if they're marginalized or they're outsiders, then they can find a community outside of that. And that's how they take it. It's very serious to them, right? So if they see a black person in these spaces, that sort of messes up the fantasy for them. For the ones I'm talking about, for the bigoted, racist ones, it messes with them, right? They don't like the fact that, if a black person is there, or if a black person is dressing up like a classically white character, right? Which this girl, Ashley, did a lot of, or like she dresses up like an anime character, which are usually like either white or Japanese characters. They have a problem with that. They almost feel like the black person is intruding on their fandom if the black person is just being there, right? And they want they want black people to kind of either stay in their place, stay in their certain spaces, or just not be there at all. And when you have something like this going on, I think it's prudent for a lot of black people within these spaces to be aware that this type of mentality exists. Like, don't be naive to it. Don't be to the point where you think, well, yeah, these white people like anime and comic books, and I like anime and comic books, and when I get into this culture, it's going to be all to the good, and these white people are going to accept me because a lot of black kids, they feel like there's a lot of black people, a lot of young black people who don't accept them for who they are, so they feel kind of marginalized too. So that's what attracts them to this type of culture. They feel like they can get some sort of attention from other these white people when they get in there, and they'll be have camaraderie and friendship with them because they all like the same thing. And that can happen, but you also have to be prepared for some of these white people feeling like you're intruding on their space. A lot of them, they build these spaces so they can be away from black people. Like, they like the fact that within anime there's hardly any black characters at all. Like, that's what they get off on, the fact that these characters mostly look white. I know they're supposed to be Japanese, but the characters mostly look white, and they don't have to deal with any black people, because you see how ridiculous they act when black people are in content just within the United States. If there's a black comic book character or a black person or a black superhero or something like that in a movie, you see how they react to that here. So they have a hissy fit when they see that here. So of course, if they see a black person dressing up like their favorite anime character who's supposed to be Japanese or white, they're really going to have a meltdown. And as black people who enter these spaces, you need to be aware of that. And I really do think you need to do some soul searching and think, like, what truly attracts me to this type of content? Like, why are you there? You know what I mean? Like actually think about that. And if the answer is, well, I like this content because I like it, because I enjoy it, then I think that's a good spot to be in. Like, if you're in it just because you enjoy the content, I think that's a good spot to be in. And this is something where I felt like that's where I am with it. Because to be totally honest, when I was into a lot of this stuff, when I first started getting into like anime and comic books, it wasn't a popular thing to begin with, so there was no reward to it. It was all, you were doing it for the love of it. There was no attention for doing cosplay back in the early 90s. It was very rare that you even had conventions where you can go and do that, right? If you were into, anime back in my day, it was not popular at all. Most people didn't even know what that was. They thought it's just cartoons or whatever. And, why are you still watching cartoons as a teenager? So if you're into it for the love of it, that's a good spot to be in. If you're in it for some sort of camaraderie or white acceptance, I got to tell you and burst your bubble and let you know that you're not going to get that. That's not the place to be in. That's not the mentality to have. If you love doing this, do it because you love it. Don't be doing it because you think you're going to have some white friends. Because if you do that, that's going to mess with your mind, because you're going to find the rejection is going to come to you over and over again. The harassment is going to come to you over and over again. The bigotry is going to come your way over and over again. You see what I'm saying? So for someone like myself, who, I used to post a lot of my cartoons back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I dealt with a lot of, nonsense and bigotry from these assholes on social media or on places like Newgrounds or whatever, because these white boys, they get real bold when they're behind the computer. But I was raised pro-black. I also was just raised in a tougher time. So for me, people talking trash online meant nothing to me. Like, that's like, you can't harass me or make me feel bad based on something you said online. If you can't say it to my face, there's nothing scary about that. And if you're going to enter into this flame war with me, just know I'm a dragon and I will drop bombs on you, okay? If you're going to play the dozens and talk mess, be prepared for me to retaliate, and for me to retaliate with overwhelming force. I have no problem scorching you on a message board. In fact, I've been kicked off of certain message boards because of that, because I have that mentality. Like, if you remember that, I don't know if it still exists, that MMA boxing message board, Share Dog. I got kicked off of that. I got kicked off of what was the other one? Crooks and Liars, which is supposed to be quote unquote a liberal message board. I got kicked off of that. So it's nothing for me to retaliate and flame you and set you on fire with some good old fashioned mama jokes or some good old fashioned talking about your race if you decide to talk mess to me. Okay, I have no problem doing that whatsoever. So if you can handle that, go ahead and make my day. All right. But I know for a lot of young black kids, they're real sensitive and they think they're going to have some sort of friendship. I didn't care about the friendship when I was going on these message boards, reading up about anime or finding manga that I couldn't find anywhere else. I just wanted to read the content. So for me, I wasn't trying to be buddy buddy with anybody. When I created my animations, yeah, I was showcasing it to people, but people being negative just to get attention for themselves because it makes them feel good to troll people, that doesn't bother me. But I know for a lot of young black people who get into these spaces, they're real sensitive about that because they think you're their buddy. I know you're not my friend. I have real friends anyway, so it doesn't bother me what some mysterious person with a fake profile says about me online to begin with. But for a lot of these black kids, they can't handle it, and for a lot of them are very delusional about racism and bigotry anyway, to the point where I made this comment on Professor Black Truth's message board where he talked about this particular story, and I said that I used to stand up against these bigots in these nerd spaces a lot more back in the day, but I stopped because I started getting more pushback from black nerds. And I talked about this with some of my other, very pro-black artists out there, where we all say that a lot of these so-called black nerd spaces are just as bad, if not worse, than the spaces with the white bigots. Because, a lot of these black nerds, they want to be seen as the safe Negro. And, if someone like me shows up talking pro-black, or if someone like me shows up and recognizes some of these white races or racism within the industry, right, then that they feel like that ruins it for them. They feel like these Negroes in these spaces, these black nerd spaces, feel like, you're causing trouble. You're making it so I can't be friends with these white people if you bring up these white people's racism, because I'll just sit here and ignore it and allow it to keep going on, and let them play in my face and call me the N-word and everything. But if you pro-black angry black man show up and start getting into arguments with them, that can hurt me. So these black nerds will turn on me. So I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm cool on the black geek spaces. I'm cool on the black nerd sections. And even when it comes to going to black conventions, I kind of pick and choose which ones I go to. If they're cool with me being pro-black and they don't mind me being pro-black, then that's fine. If they have a problem with that, or they think I'm too black or whatever, then I just don't deal with them, or I'll excuse myself. You don't have to ban me from your message board. I'll excuse myself, and that'll be that. So to a lot of these black cosplayers or black people who are into anime or whatever, a lot of them have an obsession that they want to be buddy buddy with the white people who are in these spaces, and then when they find out that doesn't work, it hurts them to their core. So you gotta be wary of that. I can't say that was what the problem was with Ashley Paxton, because I don't think anyone should be harassed or bullied. Okay, I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but I'm saying that you also can't be so wrapped up in it to where you think this is where you're unaware that this goes on in these spaces. You know what I mean? You need to be aware of the world that you live in and realize that, yes, white supremacy and bigotry will follow you even into these spaces where you think it's all about, fantasy and being whimsical and wish fulfillment. Yes, it can follow you there too, because the same mindsets that either work or create some of these things are still filled with the same white supremacist hatred for you. Okay, so you need to realize that and understand that. So you folks can let me know how you feel about this story in the comments section. I would love to hear your opinions on this. So let me be clear before I leave and just say this. I don't think there's anything wrong with a black person who's into cosplay, or a black person if you're into anime, or if you're into comic books, or you're into movies or sci-fi or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. Just realize what you're there for. Do it because you love it. Do it because you love to create it. Do it because you love to read it. Don't do it because you want a white buddy down the line to like it with you. You can't do it for that reason. So just keep that in mind when you want to get into these spaces. Anyway, Mad Black, and I will be back with my foot on the devil's back.